Good evening and welcome to another amazing night of Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson. I'm your host for tonight, along with my co-host,
Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Good evening, everybody.
And we have another very amazing week that we'll be introducing you to 4 people. Some of them you may already know and some you may not know. So it'll be a very amazing night. Before we get started, I always start with a few housekeeping notes. First of all, the NAACP Image Award nominees were announced today. So we want to congratulate all of them, and especially the ones in the literary category. So if you want to see who was nominated, you can go to naacpimageawards.net and just click the nominee link and it will show you all of the nominated books for, it'll show you everything, not just the books, but if you go to literary, it'll show you the books. Also tonight we have,
I said it was a really nice
array.
Yeah, when they announced all of them.
It is. It's a very nice array. And congratulations to them all. I've been nominated twice, so I know how exciting that is to get the notification that you've been nominated. We have 2 books to give away tonight. I'll give those away probably after the second interview. And also we're going to be having our throwback week, the first week in February. Our first show is February 1st, and we are having some people that you may not have heard from in a while. Our guests for that night will be Margaret Johnson Hodge, Marc Lacey, Vincent Alexandria, and Evelyn Palfrey. They were all multi-published authors and they took a hiatus. So we want to find out what they're doing today and see what activities they're involved in. So we also will have our book club kickback on March 22nd. The book we've selected is Rashonda Tate Billingsley's new book, Miss Pearlie's Girls. The book isn't released until February 22nd. So this gives you time to plan, and then you'll have time. You have about a month to read the book. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first guest. I'll tell you who our lineup is for tonight. Our first guest is Jacqueline Thomas. She is a best-selling award-winning author. Our second guest is Bakari Sellers. He's a political analyst on CNN, and he also is a best-selling author with a new children's book he's going to talk to us about. Marc Curtis Little is an award-winning novelist, and Brenda L. Moore is a memoir author. She is with Royston Publishing. So she's going to be our final guest for tonight. So for our first guest, we welcome Jacqueline Thomas. And we see her beautiful picture, but we're waiting for her to be on camera and so we can hear her audio. And we'll wait for her to log on.
There she is.
Hello. Hi, Jacqueline. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Doing great. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I was amazed when I read I knew you had a lot of books, but I had no idea that you had 89 titles. So kudos to you for that. That's a lot of
25 years.
Has it been that long?
That's right.
I love it. I'm still waking up to find out it was all a good dream.
Oh, well, you were with if you've been around 25 years, you were with some of the earlier authors in the romance, because wasn't romance your genre when you first started?
Yes. When I started out with Kensington, with Arabesque, with Donna Hill, Frances Ray, Forster, all the greats,
Right. So I just didn't know you had been writing continuously for so long. I knew you had books, but I didn't know you had books, So you have a new book that's coming out. And before we start talking about your new book, and it's part of a series, I believe.
Yes.
I just like you to tell people about your writing career and some of the high points, maybe one of the low points if you want to share them, because you've been around a long time And, longevity is what really makes a career in this business, not just a one-off. A lot of people think they can just write one book and have instant fame. That never happens unless you're already famous. So then it's not instant fame. But just tell us a little bit about your writing career.
Actually, I've always wanted to be a writer, and I was very, very shy. I still struggle with that. I'm a big introvert, and writing was my voice. And so my third grade teacher actually discovered my gift. I had written a story about a girl that was on the beach and she walked into the ocean. Well, for a third grader, they thought, did that really happen? Because the first thing they thought, she committed suicide. All I saw her do was walk into the ocean. She could have been a mermaid for all I knew. But anyway, they called me into the office and, set me down with the counselor and the principal and was like, did this really happen? I'm like, no, it just happened in my head. It's a story. You told us to write a story. I wrote a story. But she said it was the way that I wrote it. And so she actually was a friend of my grandmother's. I'm from a small town in Georgia. And she basically fostered my writing career. I shouldn't say career. I didn't have a career at that time. But she took me to my very first book signing, which was Tina Makara Anza. She was signing her first book.
Oh, wow.
And that was really cool. And, she introduced me and Tina gave me some great advice. And I still just love her to death for that. I didn't really start pursuing it as a career until I was 35 and pregnant with my third child. My parents were like, get a real job, writing's for fun. You're not going to make any money. And, and I read books, and I didn't see people that looked like me on the cover. So, I went to school and I went to school and I went to school till I ended up with 5 degrees, 2 masters. Thought I was going to be a lawyer, but every time I got accepted into law school, I got pregnant. So I decided after the third one, give up on law school because I don't want any more children. So I decided
I did not want you to be a lawyer.
So with my third child, I actually was on bed rest for quite a few months. And it was during that time that my mother-in-law brought me some books to read because I couldn't do anything. And it was Beverly Jenkins' first book. And that was the first time I saw a book with people of color. And then it was historical fiction, which I loved. And I grew up reading romance because my mother was an avid Harlequin reader and she loved historical romances. And when I ran out of books to read, I would read her books. So I fell in love with these books. And when I saw Beverly Jenkins, and here's a book with Black people on the cover, I just knew that it was time. So it was at that time that I decided to dust out my old manuscripts and, find one that I thought would fit. And I came up with Hidden Blessings. And so after I had my baby, I went to Romance Writers of America. That July, I had my baby in January. That July, they had a conference. I went, and the first person I met was Beverly Jenkins. And I'm like, oh, I read your book and I love it. And, in my mind, I'm like, I thought she was a lot taller, and I told her, I told her this, but
because people tell me that.
But
they always think I'm a big person.
I know, and I even, but she was just so sweet. But it was Donna Hill and Frances Ray, Gwen Foster that actually approached me and was like, hey, you're a writer? And I'm like, yes. They're like, why are you whispering? And, I was afraid to say it out loud because I read their books and they were like famous to me. And here I was trying to just sell a book. And so, they talked to me and, it was really nice. And Donna, her editor, Monica Harris at that time, was with Kensington and she was walking by. So Donna said, oh, this is our editor. And she introduced me to Monica. And of course I couldn't say a word, but hello. And she walked off with Monica. And so she came back and she had this little card and said, this is for you. And I'm like, okay. And I see a time, like an appointment card. And so she said, yeah, you are going to pitch to Monica tomorrow at 11.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no. I said, I don't even know what a pitch is. I was so green, I just written a book. I just wanted to submit it and for somebody to tell me what I needed to do right and how to fix it. I wasn't expecting really to sell. I just wasn't. I was wanting to at least start the journey. And so anyway, they stayed up with me that night. Francis Ray and Donna stayed up with me to help me pitch. And the next day I went to this session and totally forgot what I was gonna say and flubbed the pitch. But she, talked me through it. And I guess she learned enough that she asked to see the manuscript. And so I sent it to her, 19 weeks later, she made an offer. I didn't tell anybody for like 2 weeks because I was like, maybe they're going to call back and say they made a mistake. They didn't mean to call me. And finally, I emailed Donna and Francis, and I told them, and they were so excited. And mind you, these are people that didn't know me, but they were so excited. So then they emailed me their book club list and their list of independent like bookstores.
Oh, boy.
And said, all we want you to do is pay it forward. But they were so kind, and it was a true sisterhood. So I will say, when I started, they were my mentors. They were the best, and these were women that I admired for their skill, their writing. And so one of the things that I noticed was that they studied their craft. When they weren't writing, they were reading books to see what was out there selling. They were buying books on writing. And so I came home and told my husband, I want $500 because I want to buy a bunch of books on writing. And that's what I did. And I started building my library. And, like to my far left, that's all craft books on writing, and even now on my desk, I have a pile here. I still buy books on the craft of writing. And I always try to stretch myself. So that's kind of how my career started. I think I've been able to sustain it because I write multi-genre. I don't just write romance. I transitioned to Christian fiction because of my faith. And I realized that I wasn't one to write real steamy stories. So if you're looking for a really steamy story, you're not going to get that from me. I don't really want to do love scenes because I'm very visual and I have to watch that in my head in order to put it on paper. And I think even my characters deserve their privacy. So
I like that.
Hey.
That's me, that's my style. But I then branched off because I had students and teachers writing me saying, my student did a book report on your book, The Prodigal Husband. And I'm thinking that deals with infidelity. That's really not for young adults, but did a great book report. And I would actually send them an autographed copy of the book when they wrote about me. But what I realized I had, because at that time too, I was teaching, teens at church. I was a youth counselor. And, my students were reading my books.
Interesting.
And questioning me about these stories. And so then I realized, and I talked with my agent, I wanted to write books that spoke to their issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I mean, even me growing up reading Harlequin and romance, I kind of would skip over the steamy pages. It was, I was more just about the whole romance. And if he's going to win her, and we know in romance, he always wins her, but still that journey of how he's going to win her. And so I transitioned to YA. Now coming out this year, I would be writing suspense and adding suspense to what I do. So I'm kind of all over the place, it sounds like, but that's how I've been able, I believe, to sustain my career, in that I can still surprise my readers, and I can still stretch myself as a writer and, try something new. I'm not afraid to try something new. And so that's what I do. And hopefully people will love it or like it and not throw it against the wall and, all of that. But it's been a wonderful career. The upside, I have a lot of upsides. writing is very therapeutic for me. It's gotten me through some of the worst times, of my life. This particular book that we're probably going to talk about tonight, I wrote this after losing my oldest daughter. So I was on deadline writing this book, and I had to kind of take a break and come back to it. The first one in the Polk Island series, I lost my mom 8 months before I lost my daughter, and I was working on that book. So believe it or not, even though it was challenging, those two books saved me. They saved me, and I was able to
therapeutic.
My feelings. Yes, I was able to put my anger, put my feelings, my confusion, all of that into these books. The downside, I don't really have a downside. I don't think. I don't. The business side of it is not as fun, to be honest with you, but I am a businesswoman. I am super organized, hyper focused, a personality. So it works for me. I guess the downside would be, I would love to see more of us in all genres. And we're seeing that. We're starting to see that. We're starting to see more, people of color in suspense and all through the different Harlequin lines, and that's always encouraging, and that's wonderful, because we don't live in a world where everybody's the same. We have different experiences. We look different, but our experiences are all the same. So there are people of all colors that have lost a child, that have lost a loved one, a husband, that have been sick. We've all had those experiences. I also suffer from chronic panic disorder. And I did stop writing back in 2016. And that was because I had become agoraphobic and could not leave my house for a year. So I had to, at that point, I kept that a secret for years, and I've had it for over 30 years. But I
you did say you were a true introvert, so
yes, yes. And so, but that was to the extreme, and I had to fight my way out of that. And so now, for me, I feel like to honor my mother, my daughter, my father, my grandmother, all the people that I've lost, I have to live my best life. To honor them, live on purpose. And so that's what I'm doing now. So I'm kind of stepping out of my comfort zone and doing a lot more, as you see, a lot more, because at one point you didn't really see me on social media. And I certainly wasn't doing selfies or videos and all of that.
On Instagram.
I know. And I don't know what I'm doing.
A lot of times people like that because it's more pure. You're not trying to do what's trending. You're just being yourself. And I think a lot of times your readers appreciate that.
I hope so, because that's all I can be is me. And so, but I'm stepping out more and living on purpose. And so, that's what I do. And again, my career saved me.
Well, you certainly had an extensive one with 89 titles. That's a lot of ideas. Every book has an idea behind it and characters. So
what do you think you get your ideas from? Because it is a lot of ideas to write 89 books over 25 years. That's like 2 or 3 books, probably more than 2 or 3 books. Yeah, I haven't done the math on it, but
I've done between 4 and 5 books a year.
Awesome. So how do you come up with your ideas?
From everywhere. I am kind of a what if person. I love psychology. I have a master's in psychology. And for me, I always want to know why people behave the way they behave, good or bad. I believe there's a reason why they are the way they are. And I'm always intrigued by that. And so I tend to kind of start my stories off with the what if scenario. For example, the prodigal husband. I was talking with my husband and I was like, what if I had an affair and I leave the night that, because I take my child, there's a car accident, the child dies, and I leave that night and he was totally out, like like, I couldn't even finish because he was gone. He was divorced. He had moved on.
You moved on.
He had moved on. So, but for me, the prodigal husband, I wanted to know what that would look like. So I came up with the idea that the husband cheated. It's the way after my husband acted, the way he acted. It was going to be the husband cheating, not her. And the daughter, he took the daughter to keep the wife from leaving, ends up in a hit and run, and the child unfortunately dies, but it's all backstory. I don't bring it into the book.
Okay.
I couldn't do that. So she's pretty much, they've just been told she's gone, and he couldn't face his wife. He could not face her. And I think that's very realistic, because I think I would have left. I think I would have just dipped. And the thing about it was, he stays gone a year and then comes home a year later expecting to pick up, like, honey, I'm home. And no. Right. And so I wanted to also explore the idea of infidelity, in that sometimes, and I don't agree with it, trust me, I do not agree with infidelity for any reason, but I know that sometimes we as women take things for granted. And sometimes we don't do what we did to get them to keep them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, right. And so I wanted to explore that too. Now, the whole thing with this was, what if the girl he had the affair with is his business partner? So to kind of up the stakes. And I know me, she got to go.
Yeah. Or him.
Right. But, so it was kind of that whole thing of, they had such a successful business. They had contracts. He could not just say, you quit, he could just knock her out. It was complicated, but what was that going to do to their marriage? You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So exploring that type of issue with other books, with some of my Christian fiction, like with Jezebel, that was taken from the Bible, Queen Jezebel, and brought into modern day, because I wanted to explore what that would look like in modern day, because in the Bible, she was hateful, she was something else. And so I created a modern day Jezebel. Her name was Jezebel. And I made her husband a pastor, because, no queen, made her, but it was about control, because I grew up thinking, because my grandmother, and I'm from the South, if y'all can't tell from my accent, in Georgia. And at church, my grandmother used to, see women walk in with like red, and like, with the short sleeves, and she would, that Jezebel. And so I'm hearing this, and I'm trying to figure out why this woman's a Jezebel. I like the dress. Like, so, in my quest to find out what they were talking about, I confess I used to eavesdrop, because my aunt, her sister, my great aunt, they would, after church, they would wear that poor woman out. Like, did you see that dress? And she half naked. And I went and I had to go put that blanket, because she wanted to sit up there in front of the pastor, that loose Jezebel. And so I figured out, okay. But when I started to study the word for myself, I realized she really wasn't. It wasn't about her being a loose woman. She was about power and control.
Exactly.
And then I learned doing research that there was actually a spirit, the spirit of Jezebel. There's a spirit, and it usually resides in churches, but it can only reside in churches with an Ahab spirit.
Okay.
And so I wanted to show that. So I learned as I write as well. My book Redemption was based on Hosea and Gomer's story. And this is where God told told Hosea to marry Gomer, knowing that she was unfaithful, and then when she left, God told him, go and get her, bring her back. She had children for other people. And I'm thinking, that's an interesting story. When God tells you, go back and get that woman, and you're a mega pastor. So that's where I get my ideas. And actually, I get ideas so fast that I actually have 48 proposals, because I try to do them in proposal form as I get them. Because like I said, I'm very visual. And then I'll put it aside. So right now, and I counted before I got on, but I have 48 proposals of stories I have not written.
Oh my goodness,
Wow,
you're gonna be to
that's amazing.
200 before you know.
Yeah, it's gonna be quick. Well, we're getting close to our time. And it's been so fascinating. I wanted to make sure that we got some information about your new book, Her Hometown Hero, so that people would know what the storyline for that is, and to immediately go out and get. Now, is that one out yet, or is that coming out?
It's actually January 25th.
Oh, right. So it's next Tuesday. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay.
So what is Her Hometown Hero about?
I'm really excited about it. It's the second book in the Poke Island series, and it is about a young man named Trey Rothschild, who is a descendant of Pope Rothschild, the founder of the island. He comes home from the Marines broken. He's a double amputee, so he's lost his legs and he's lost his team. And so, you know, coming home is hard for him, because he feels like a failure. People are saying, you're a hero. Thank you for your service. And it makes him nauseous, because he felt like he failed his team. And he wishes that he had died right along with them, because now he doesn't have legs. He's got to navigate his life differently. And so his high school crush, Gia Harris, she's back in town on the island, and she's a physical therapist, and she is not about to let him sit on the sidelines of life. So that book, actually, he deals with, you know, PTSD, survivor's guilt, you know, a lot of the invisible scars that soldiers deal with. My father was a Marine, and I wanted to write a story that honored the Marines and service people everywhere. And, you know, I hope again that people will be pleased that I did it justice. And it's my way of saying, you know, thank you for your service, and you deserve to have this story told. And I also am very active with Wounded Warriors. And so, you know, some of the proceeds are going to go to Wounded Warriors.
As a retired soldier and a combat veteran, I appreciate you telling that story and telling it in a way where you're not trying to commercialize it or sensationalize it, but actually telling this story. So that's the great part about this. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank
Right.
you.
You're humanizing it.
Yes.
And you had a message for aspiring writers. Don't give up. And if I heard you correctly, when you did your first manuscript, did you say it was 19 weeks later?
Yes, so you can tell I counted.
Okay, so that means that's what, 5 months, basically. 5 months. It took you 5 months before you heard that they were accepting your book and publishing.
Yes.
So
I mean, the only way to fail is to not try at all. And you know, when you call yourself a writer, I honestly believe you have a special gift, and you can't not write. You know, even when I was going through everything, I could not write, even if it was anger, and if it was just a letter to God and I'm just railing, you know, I was still writing. And so for me, again, it's very therapeutic, and I can't not write. You know, I keep saying I'm going to get to 100 books and retire, but we'll just have to see about that, because if the stories keep coming, I'm going to write, you know.
Well, you have 48 proposals, so you're not going to.
That's the truth. Well, Jacqueline, thank you so much for being a guest. Let people know how they can reach you, your website or your social media.
Okay, well, I'm on Facebook at Jacqueline Writes, so at Jacqueline Writes, and Jacqueline is JACQUELIN. There's no E at the end. And my website is www.jacqueline-thomas.com.
And I put it in the chat, so they'll be able to find you. Actually, I put it twice, so people have no excuse not to be able to find you.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being a guest. And you would never know you were an introvert.
I'm coming out of it, you know, finally at 61, I'm coming out of it. So praise God for that.
Okay,
still
well, thank you so much. And you have a great evening and a great continued career.
Thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all again.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye. Okay, so that was Jacqueline Thomas, and she's a multi-published author. So our next guest is Bakari Sellers. Some of you may see him regularly as a political analyst on CNN, but he's also an author. He has a new children's book, and he also has a memoir that was published in 2020. But he's the new children's book, Who Are Your People, has recently come out. It was released last Tuesday, as a matter of fact. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for allowing me to use this very robust platform. I'm happy to be here, and Harper Kids and Harper Collins love and appreciate you all as well. They said this is something you have to do, so I'm glad.
Oh, well, we appreciate
Thank you
Harper
for
Collins.
listening to them.
Yeah, I know for sure, for sure.
They've been very supportive. So tell us about your, what motivated you to do this children's book? Is it something that you've always wanted to do, or did some events motivate you to write about this topic? I know asking somebody who are your people, that's something that we do in our culture. When you meet someone that could be connected with your, your family, or, people that you know and have met, you ask them, who are your people? That is, and I don't know if other people use that phrase, but that's a good phrase for a book title.
It is. So, for me, getting into the children's book arena was very, very difficult. It's something I've always wanted to do, particularly after I had kids. I joke all the time. It does have some veracity and truth to it that I had to be a New York Times bestseller just to get an opportunity to write a children's book. But my kids were, just so inquisitive. They're always looking, learning, staring, laughing, giggling, like most kids are when they see something. They want to utilize all their senses, touch, smell, sight, etc. And, unfortunately, having people and images that look like them is far and few between. I mean, we're getting more, but it's still more blue and red and green and purple people than there are black and brown people on the front covers of books and in cartoons. And I said, why not me? Why not give this a chance? Reggie Brown, who's the illustrator in this, I try to mention his name in every interview I do, was just special. And this was an amazing opportunity. And, I think my kids appreciate what their dad tried to do.
Well, I think it's interesting that you say that, because I know that there's been a bit of a backlash against a lot of the cartoon movies that feature people of color, especially African Americans. They wind up turning them into animals. Princess and the Frog, she was a frog for most of the movie. I believe it was, I can't remember the name of the movie, where the man was actually a little blue person for most of the movie. So they said that African American characters don't get to be throughout the movie. So for you to say that about books, especially because there are so many African American children's authors out there, it's very interesting. I know you had an interview not too long ago. Actually, I believe it might have been yesterday or today, maybe it was yesterday, where you had a discussion about a lot of the book bannings that were actually stifling many African American children's authors.
Yeah, you see that across the country, and it's unfortunate. The unique thing about Who Are Your People is not that it's rooted just in Southern culture, because, who are your people is a very, very Southern phrase. Who are your people? Where are you from? Is something that we use often. And it's not just the representation of the twins in the book, but it's also the history that's taught in the book. We explore through images, not just people like King, and we go all the way from King to Bethune to, even Kamala and Stacy. We don't just, stop at images. We also do events like February 1st, 1960, the start of the sit-in movement. We have a very, very powerful image of some of our ancestors in a cotton field. We present these images as well as these people, so that as you are seeing yourself, you're able to learn about your history and hopefully come away with a sense of pride.
Okay, what age group is the book targeting?
So that, I mean, look, I know that when you buy the book, it has 4 to 8 beside it, which is good. It's a captive audience. It's an audience where you begin to have that insatiable desire to learn about yourself and learn about others. But I think it's kind of unique because I want, when parents to read it, I want some of those memories to trigger them so that they re-educate themselves, so they can explain the import of that character to their child. I want them to think about that moment in history. So they'll be like, man, I remember this. Let me make sure that next time I read it, or before I read it, I'll be able to explain what this event was and who those people were. I want to talk about slavery in a way that they'll understand what happened. These are the conversations. So yeah, it's 4 to 8, but I think it's an educational tool right now. And the unique part about this book is the moment that we're in, because, there are a lot of people trying to figure out how to talk to young people about race. And this is not the panacea or the end all be all by any stretch, but it is a tool in the toolbox.
I like it because, when we talk about who are our people, sometimes when we talk about our history, we always want to talk about it in the negative. But this is more of a celebration. Let us know who our people are, so we can generate that excitement for our history. We can generate that pride for our history. And then the fact that you're doing it with for such a young age group is good, because you're planting that seed early, so they don't have to grow up and be ashamed.
One of those that you bring up a good point, and the reason we're doing it early and those things is I was with Anderson Cooper on one of his specials, Full Circle. It's another platform that we have at CNN. And one of the things that he brought up and we talked about was the Kenneth Clark doll experiment. For those people who don't remember, the doll experiment was a sociological test given to children, young children, back during Brown versus the Board of Education. It was quite simple. They just had dolls of all shades. And, the kids, when they saw the lighter dolls, the white dolls and lighter dolls, those dolls were equated with being beautiful, with being clean, with being educated. When they saw the darker dolls or black dolls, that was equated with being nasty, being dirty, being ignorant, being ugly. And so it's important that at this age, we're able to say, you're beautiful, you're strong. This is why, this is where you're from. These are who your people are. Please be proud. And then when other kids read it, they'll be like, oh, this is a dope story. This is amazing. And they'll be able to have empathy for their classmate. When white kids read it or somebody else, they'll be able to say, my classmate is strong. My classmate is beautiful. My classmate comes from this. And I think that it's a unique tool right now that hopefully we can learn and grow from.
Awesome.
That is true. It's also something unfortunate is that they did an update of that experiment not too long ago. I want to say in the last 10 years.
It was in 2010.
Okay,
You were close.
Close.
No, you were really close. Most people didn't even know they did it. So, but yeah, you were really close.
Yeah, I try to keep up with things. And the responses were similar to what they were in, I think it was 1955 when the Brown versus Board, I think. So
that just shows you that our work, this is not over.
We still have a lot of work.
We still have a lot of work. And this is just like, again, it's a tool. And hopefully this book does well. Tomorrow evening, I think the New York Times bestsellers list comes out. And hopefully it does well. We'll see what happens. And hopefully we're able to write more. Hopefully, this is, I'm sure you two will appreciate it. I hope those watching will appreciate it. Reggie Brown was a brilliant artist, a great artist. And I think, what I was hoping, and this maybe subconsciously, is that our male voices, when Black men pick up the book or Black fathers pick up the book, they'll be more inclined, because it should be their voice. They can hear their voice in the words to read to their children. And hopefully more Black men take time to read to their children as well.
That's interesting, because someone commented on a thread recently that Black men had lost their voice in the culture. That women were getting a lot more attention. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's somewhat of a red herring. I don't think that you have to pit us against y'all, right? I don't think that that's fair, just, or intellectually honest. I think
a lot too.
I think that Black women can get the shine they deserve and the credit and props they deserve for having the magic, particularly in this moment. But I do think that it's also okay for you to lift up Black men and say we need to have more of your voices. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. And so, for me, it was about when just seeing Reggie's words, and this may or may not actually be a thing, but hopefully between his imagery and my voice, maybe Black men will be able to hear themselves in the words, and they'll be able to read this book and more books, and they'll be more inclined to just be that much more of a father and reader to their children.
So it sounds to me like you want to be more intentional about maybe working with men. I don't know if you and Reggie plan to work together to do more children's books, or if you plan to work with more Black men so you can get that voice out there.
Well, in order to do more, this one has to do well. They just don't give out they don't give out book deals to feel good, right? So, hopefully this does well and we'll get an opportunity. If I get an opportunity, I'm definitely doing it with Reggie. We just have a chemistry, and, Reggie, the thing about children's books, I'm not sure that everybody gives the most credence to, is that children's books, unlike my adult book, and my adult book somewhat did, but it was more visual. I tried to make sure that you could taste the pages and touch the pages, especially when I was talking about the South, or smell it. I tried to paint a picture. But children's book, you got to have a rhythm. Children's books are more rhythmic. And it's funny because I like to listen to Outkast a lot. Reggie listens to a lot of older music when he writes, but we both when he illustrates, but we both write and illustrate to a rhythm. And I think that's what made the pages pop that much more.
Now, the illustrator, Reggie Brown, I wanted to, is he a well-known illustrator? Is it someone that you were connected with through the publisher?
Yeah, I was connected through the publisher. He is, let's say this, if he ain't well-known, he should be. And one of the things I'm going to do is work extremely hard that after Who Are Your People, if he ain't well-known, he will be. But he is a newer illustrator. I want to say 2019 is when he quit his job and kind of went in full time, but he's had a lot of projects. He was just recently on my podcast, if you want to learn a little bit more about Reggie. But I want to lift him up because he is a beautiful brother who is really good at what he does. I always tell young folk, find something you love and be the best at it, and people will pay you for it. And Reggie found something he loved, and he's really, really good at it.
Well, I want to thank you because you already had a platform, and then for you to take a chance on somebody who was rather new in that industry, and to take a chance and give him a platform, give him a voice, that's huge. Because often, and I think it gives hope to people who are still trying to work their way in their craft, because there might have been an illustrator out there who said, I can't talk to Bakari Sellers. No, I can't do that. Let me just start down here and then work my way up. So for you to give a voice, that's huge for people. And I think it gives people hope.
I think there's a lot of responsibility that comes with whatever platform you have. I mean, at CNN, there aren't many of us. And so you have a responsibility every time you go on TV. But then there are other opportunities when you speak, when you do podcasts, when you write books. And so I think that you have to utilize your platform with responsibility, especially to our people.
Absolutely.
So what do you, I know you want to hopefully make the New York Times bestseller list. Where do you see the book going? Have you contacted schools, and have you been able to tap into that yet?
A lot of schools have reached out. The book is today's Tuesday.
Brand new.
Today's his birthday. It's 1 week old.
Right.
Today. So we're going to take it everywhere and do everything. There aren't many events I won't do. I think that when you talk to Lauren and John, who helped me out exponentially at Harper, they'll tell you that there ain't nothing I won't do. I open up my entire Rolodex of contacts, and I try to do every show, every platform I can do, because I think that when you do the work, you really want people to read it and you want people to consume it. And I want as many kids to have Who Are Your People as possible, because at the end of the book it's so cool. It's what will you dream? How will you change the world? And it challenges the reader and the person who is being read to. I mean, I think that no matter if you're 4 or 44, we have to rededicate ourselves to being a people of dreamers. That's kind of cliche to say as we celebrate King Day, but we once were people of dreamers. And I think that we've lost that along the way. And hopefully this book it will inspire somebody to dream a big dream.
Well, I mean, I think that's huge. And that sounds like a conversation starter. Once you finish reading the story, you can actually have that conversation with that child and see how they see themselves through
Right.
reading a book like this.
Now,
Correct.
someone asked, can you show the cover, one of the viewers? I see it behind you, but is they want to see it a little bit larger?
Yeah, no, here you go. And that's
Mhm.
Sadie, and that's Stokely. Those are my 3-year-old twins.
Oh,
So you put
okay.
them on the cover.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care, but yeah, they on there. Yeah, no. Then the imagery I'll show you while we're here. The imagery is just amazing. So you have some images like this. This is a scene from February 1st, 1960.
Yes.
At the
Okay.
Woolworth lunch counter that started the sit-in movement.
Okay.
We go all the way through to Barack Obama here.
Okay.
And where are you from? You have powerful images such as this.
Okay.
That is a powerful image.
And then my favorite is this is my favorite image in the book. It just happens to be the last page.
Okay.
So how will you,
Okay.
so what will you dream and how will you change the world? And we made Sadie the president of the United States.
Yes.
And made Stokely an astronaut and put him on Mars. So
Okay.
that's this kind of powerful imagery that breeds that hope and inspiration. So who are your people out everywhere?
Absolutely. Well, Valinda Miller, I believe she's a bookseller. She said that your book is doing very well in her store.
Sure.
That means a lot. Thank you so much. And please, if you drop a line to Harper Kids, I'll try to get whomever I can. I may not be able to visit your store. If it's somewhere I travel, I'll visit, stop in and sign some. But if I can, I'll try to get you some book plates.
Well, actually, her store is in South Carolina.
Oh, well, dope.
It's
Just
in
where it
Turning
is.
Pages. I think it's Turning Pages. I think that's the name of her store. So
Yeah, tell her to contact me directly. I'll come by and if I'll make that trip over the next 2 weeks. If she has some in stock, I'll come through and sign them and then let people know where they are.
okay,
All right.
Belinda.
Get on it now. Get on it. Well, I know Gwen wanted to ask you a little bit about your memoir that you released a couple years ago.
Yeah, this was look at that hand. I just happen to have one here. Look
Just
at that.
look at it, right?
That handsome cover right there. I really didn't like this cover. It was chosen for me. It was not my favorite,
Is
but
that you?
that's me. I was six.
Okay.
You just don't like it because it's your baby picture.
It's my baby picture, but it did well. This book has done extremely well. My Vanishing Country, and it's just an amazing. It was an amazing opportunity to write about the Black working class.
And I was just about to ask you, what was your message that you wanted to convey in your memoir?
It's about those invisible people. Like the women who wear the big hats, who when you hug them, they smell like Chanel No. 5. They sit on all day long. They sit on the front 2 rows of the church, and they make pies, those coconut pies and sweet potato pies with a whole stick of butter or 2. And they gotta.
That's how you do it.
They gotta, but they make those decisions about whether or not they get their prescription drugs or pay their utility bills, and they're the backbone of our community. I wanted to talk about this struggle. I wanted to talk about those individuals in the barbershop that went to war and they come back and tell you how great Ali was and how they remember when King came through town. Just tell those stories of those working class people who, we hear about the white working class often, but we don't ever talk about the Black working class. And I tried to do that in that book.
Right. That's a great point. I was looking through some of my old speeches from a few years ago, and I noticed I normally end my speeches talking about my grandmother. My grandmother's not famous. She wasn't the first African-American this or that or the other. However, it's because of what she did and the way she raised me that I was able to build a platform for myself And I think often we celebrate the people who have built those platforms. We celebrated the people who are the activists and the actors and the athletes and so forth. And we forget about the people who got them there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like
we celebrate King, Martin, and Rosa. I mean, Malcolm and Rosa, but we don't necessarily talk about Julian Bond or
right.
Ella Baker or Fannie Lou Hamer or Marion Barry. We don't necessarily talk about all of these individuals who, who, as I like to say, who slept on jailhouse floors, who know what gunpowder smell like, some who, paid the full measure of devotion. We don't talk about James Meredith. People don't hear the stories about Jimmy Lee Jackson. So that's, I tried to tell many of those stories in this book. And I think that's important, that if we don't take control and share our narrative, then either no one will tell it or it will be distorted.
Absolutely.
And there's so many unnamed heroes, and heroines that just if you think about the Birmingham bus boycott, where people took a whole year and didn't ride the bus and walked and carpooled, that was just an amazing feat that I wish would get more attention as far as the process of it, because it does get mentioned that it happened and that it was successful, but very few people know that they did it for a year, or a little bit, actually over a year.
Yeah. Telling those stories, people are sometimes taken aback by, the testament to the strength that these individuals had, and we wouldn't be here utilizing this platform but for them, and the courage of authors during that time to kind of bring it home, to be willing to share their stories, or singers who, you hear the stories about Strange Fruit all the time, how she was chased around and threatened to be killed when she sang and performed that song, but yet she did. And so that art has always carried us through, and the griots, as they were called, we have to be, and Who Are Your People falls in that line of just trying to take ownership and share our story.
Well, I was also telling Gwen about, I was actually sitting in the audience when you came to New Orleans back in September of 2019. And something that you said was that you cannot talk about Kamala Harris without talking about Shirley Chisholm. You cannot talk about Shirley Chisholm without talking about Fannie Lou Hamer. So it was really interesting when you mentioned her a little bit earlier. So I think that it all kind of comes full circle when you're talking about Who Are Your People, when you're talking about your memoir and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. I always draw a nexus from, you have Kamala, who I love, but you also had Shirley Chisholm, who was unbowed and unbroken. But you wouldn't have any of those if you didn't have the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and the courage of Fannie Lou Hamer. And you wouldn't have, Fannie would tell you, or they would all tell you, that it took the masterful education of Majeska Simpkins and Septima Clark, and it took the organizing of Ella Baker, and it goes back even further to Elizabeth Evelyn Wright. And so all of these Black women that we just named, they're not holidays, they're not really written about in our history, but they're integral to us having the first Black woman vice president, in the history of this country.
Speaking into the future.
I know.
Well, and the first Black president, that was part of that as well. For sure, there was a lot of organizing that made that happen. I wanted to ask you a little bit, we only have 5 minutes left, but I did want to ask you about being a CNN political analyst, and kind of how that came about, and how long have you been on there? You can say, I don't know.
I've been on CNN for 6 years now.
Oh, it's been that long.
For a second.
I know, 6.5 years. Actually.
Wow. Okay.
I got hired June of 2015. I got hired kind of off the street right after my good friend Clem and 8 others were killed in the Charleston massacre down in Charleston, South Carolina, Mother Emanuel AME Church.
Oh boy.
I got a few offers, but I wanted to go with CNN, I've been there ever since, and we have some good news coming from my relationship with CNN in the next the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so no exclusives right now, huh?
I can't do it. They signed my check. Can't give it to you like that.
I understand. Well, we only have a few minutes left, but one of the things I did want to ask you is, one, you went into politics at a very young age.
I did.
And not only that, then you went on to CNN, and you often tell people, and I'm going to go back to that moment in 2019, you and Angela Rye went into a little bit of a back and forth because you made this statement where you said in 2016, there was a race between the Democrat, the Republican, and the couch won. And she said, that's true, but we also have to think about voter security.
That's
so
true.
you guys went back and forth on that, and I think both of you are actually right when it comes to that. So I always tell people, and I know we have the midterm elections coming up, and I'm not asking you to talk about any particular candidate, but why is it important to get out there and make your voice heard?
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of individuals who were just disenchanted in 2016. And let me also say that one of the biggest things that people who are in my party, the Democratic Party, sometimes fail to do, especially during this time period, is there's a lot of conversation about Donald Trump. And this is just a larger political conversation, not a partisan one. And people are tired of that. And you have to give people a reason to vote, not a reason to vote against something. That doesn't move people. I mean, that is what it is. It's cute, right? To go out there and say, my opponent is terrible. But at the end of the day, people want to know how you're going to make their life better.
Yes.
And you have to do a better job of communicating that. It's going to be a fight. I think that the 2022 elections are going to be quite interesting. I am watching Georgia like a hawk because there's so much that it's so nuanced between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. I mean, it's so important, and it's Georgia. I mean, Atlanta is the cradle of Black America. It once was DC. People will tell you it's mad Atlanta. I ain't trying to make nobody mad. I'm just telling you what the people say.
Right.
And so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in Georgia when you got a Black Democrat running against a Black Republican, both of great notoriety, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a Senate race with two Black, a Black person from.
You have. It was actually in 2014. It was in 2014. It was a young lady. It was a little known Richland County. She's dope. I love her with all my heart, but she just didn't have the name ID. But her name was Joyce Dickerson. She ran against Tim Scott, and Tim Scott won.
Oh, okay, in South Carolina. Okay.
Oh, I read Tim Scott's book. He talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
it didn't get the notoriety. Probably because she wasn't that well known.
And it was a different time, in 2014, this is before every candidate running for office, popped up on Rachel Maddow or my friend Joy Reid's show. And before social media was what it was now, you put out an ad now. For example, I challenge all of you all. I have a good friend running for United States Senate in Louisiana. His name is Gary Chambers. I challenge you just to go look at his ad.
Yes.
He's sitting now. You might not have seen this, Miss Gwen, but he got on this blue suit, sharp. He's from Baton Rouge, and he sits in his field, and he lights up this fat joint, and he's just smoking this joint in the field for 37 seconds. And the point behind the ad is, once every 37 seconds, a person of color is arrested for a marijuana crime. And he goes into how the decriminalization and how it's a fascinating ad, but probably because it's so blunt.
Is it play on words?
I'm here all week.
I know what that means.
Oh my goodness, I cannot believe I really enjoyed this conversation. But if you can remind our listeners where they can find Who Are Your People, and then if you have any parting words, we'd love to hear them.
No, I mean, Who Are Your People? Everywhere books are sold, please go out and get it. I know you have young people in your church, in your school, in your house, and your relatives. make sure everybody gets one, get 1 or 2 copies if you can. If not, just spread the word, post about it. I appreciate that. I always tell folk to dream big and dream with their eyes open. It's not what this country was or what it is, but it's about what it can be. And we have to reimagine what she looks like. So thank you guys for having me. Thank you for allowing me to be on this platform. Well wishes, and God bless you all.
And God bless you as well.
Same
Thank
to
you so
you.
much.
And we'll be
Thank
looking
you.
at the New York Times bestseller list. And
Yeah, you ain't gonna be the only. You ain't gonna be the only one.
Let's have a watch party.
Have a great day, y'all. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so
That was a
that
good
was
presentation.
Bakari Sellers and his new children's book. And now our next guest is, so I'm going to do the book giveaways at the end of this interview coming up.
Just so you know, Mary Evans posted that ad with Gary Chambers in case you want to see it later.
Oh, she did. Okay, well, I would love to take a look at it. I like creativity.
Mhm.
One of the best ads I saw during Christmas was a Chevrolet ad where this girl had her dad's car refurbished, or whatever you call it. He had he had lost his wife. He was sad. It was Christmas time, and he had an old Chevrolet that had been in the garage for years, and she had it, refurbished for Christmas, and so spanking new. And she said, "Merry Christmas, Dad." That was a good commercial. I love that creativity. A lot of them are just routine, but every now and then one will catch your attention. So we have with us best-selling author Marc Curtis Little, and his latest book is The Bootleggers Mistress, but he writes a lot of historical, it's fiction, but it's really autobiographical, biographical, I should say. A lot of his books are stemmed in history. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV, Marc.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawson and Gwen. I really appreciate being on the program.
And we appreciate having you.
I gotta go ahead.
Well, I didn't know if you and Rhonda have met or connected before.
No, never.
We know each other now.
Yeah.
We sure do, no doubt.
Yes, but
And I'm acquainted with you, the two of you, because I've watched the program many times, and I just finished watching a good portion with Representative Sellers, and I thought that was fantastic of what he's doing with this with his career. Exactly.
I know. I absolutely love him, and I love seeing young people just leading the way.
Absolutely.
Because, we always kind of write off our young people, but it's good to have a reminder that our young people are still out in the fight.
Well, as a dad of a 40-year-old, I understand. I am so blessed to have a son who, although he's not at the level politically as Bakari is, he's an entrepreneur and a very smart young man, and has very little to do with me.
Well, it's gratifying to have smart children. Let me say
Absolutely.
that.
Well, you can't fall too far from the tree, because I'm looking at your credentials. I mean, you won some awards, and you're a top radio personality. So he had to have gotten it from somewhere.
Well, he watched me, and it's so funny when you talk to your children and you ask them, "Where did you get that from?" And he'll say to me, "I watched you, Daddy." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I hope you watched with 20/20 vision."
That is so true. And that's why our children learn more from what they see us do than what we say.
Absolutely.
They really are paying attention. It might not seem like they're paying attention, but they really are paying attention.
That's right.
So tell us about The Bootleggers Mistress. That's your latest book, and it was named the 2021 Florida Indie Author Project Award-winning in adult fiction in that category, but it won some other awards too, didn't it?
Yes, it did. The finalists in the Next Generation Indie Book Awards, and also a finalist in the National Indie Excellence Awards, and a couple of other regional books, because it has a lot to do with Newark, New Jersey, which is my home, but it also travels through Anderson, South Carolina, which is my dad's home, and Jacksonville, Florida, where I've spent the past nearly 50 years here after I left college to come here to work and to raise two children. And now we're getting ready to move back to New Jersey, believe it or not.
Oh, you're going from Florida to New Jersey.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a different trip.
I told
some people north are going south for the weather.
Exactly.
Style.
Well, I told some of my friends, I said, as I'm going up north 95, I'll see you and then we'll wave at each other.
So what is the basic, is the Bootleggers Mistress, is it based on your family? Is
Well, it has a
something
lot-
that you know, or
Has a lot to do with my family, as my other 6 novels, because I was blessed. Although I heard you all talk to my grandparents, I didn't know my grandparents on either side of my family. So the education that I received about the South and also the travel northward along the Great Migration, I got from stories that I cobbled together from hearing my aunts talk and my mother talk to her friends. And this book was an outgrowth of some of those conversations. Now, it wasn't completely about those conversations, but as a novelist, you take you take a little license in moving things around and changing names and this, that, and the other. But what I do try to stay tethered to is that when I talk about real things happening, I try to stay as close, if not completely on point, with those events. And I talk about a lot of events in this book. One of the backdrop of the book, the beginning of the backdrop of the book was in Anderson, South Carolina, which is my father's home. Now, ironically, before I went to my family reunion in 2019, I had only spent maybe 5 hours in my father's hometown. Now, I was born in 51. I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. I was not allowed to go down south for various reasons. I was upstart, had a lot of mouth, and I don't think that would have sat very well in the South in the 50s and the 60s, okay?
right?
So I was not allowed to go down south. I would pitch a fit with my mother and my father, but no, you're not going down to see your cousins. In fact, a couple of my cousins in 2019, I met for the very first time. So I'm a newcomer at some of this. But what I did with the book is that I wanted to write about the real Great Migration as seen not through just the eyes of what was written in The Warmth of Other Suns, which was a fantastic book, by the way,
Yeah, it was.
or some of the books. I wanted to do a fictional, but I also wanted to make sure that it had enough reality so people could say, that sounds like where I was from. What I did with the Bootleggers Mistress was I put together a scenario where the father of the family, Hallie Lacey, had an oldest daughter. Her name was Carrie. Carrie was much like me, and Carrie had this lust to know about what was going on in her hometown of Anderson, South Carolina, and her dad didn't have a problem showing her that. She left at right around 16 years old, was actually forced to leave. And this was a magic journey from 16 years old to the age of 95, where it starts in the book. I start with a 95-year-old Carrie Lacey, who along the journey adopted the persona of her alter ego, who became Dicey Kaufman. And that's how the book traveled. But there were 2 secrets in the book. One, the death of a very nasty white man, and after the murder of a very dastardly white man, and the disappearance of a prominent Black man, both from Carrie's experiences in the Deep South. So that's how the backdrop of the book and so many events moved through the book to the point where Carrie Lacey, nee Dicey Kaufman, although she couldn't be convicted of a crime that they tried to jail her for jailed her for at 95 years old, but she said that and she was exonerated, never had to go to trial, had a great lawyer, but she said that who would have the nerve to do that to her from the exemplary life that she led after that. She said, I'm going down south and I'm going to defend myself. And so the book picks up after a long journey, going back and forth to her childhood and adulthood, but it ends up in a courtroom. And the courtroom drama is one that I really, really like. And if I was ever to try to do a screenplay, that's where the book would pick up, right at the courtroom.
Oh my goodness, that's so much to unpack. I don't even know what to start to
It is. You know, we have 2 South Carolina connections back to back. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you know Turning Page Bookshop in South
Yes.
Carolina?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay, because if you didn't, I was gonna say she needs to know about the book and because
Right.
the local connection to South Carolina.
Yes, Yeah, as you know, I'm independently published. I've been doing that almost 15 years now.
Yes.
And as I said in an interview last week, someone asked me, would you want to be traditionally published? Well, anybody would like to be traditionally published.
Mhm.
But Gwen, as you know, and Dr. Lawson, as you probably know, when we get independent, we get kind of uppity, okay? And we're not going to let anybody tell us how they're going to release our book and these kinds of things. And I told a young man who actually won the American Library Association Black Caucus Poetry Award, his name is Rockman Johnson. He wanted to be traditionally published, and I gave him both sides of it. And I said to him, how would you like to sign a contract? Normally for very little advance, because advances don't come like they used to. And if you're not known, you don't get much of an advance.
Right.
And people don't know this, that if you don't sell the books, you got to pay that advance back.
I was about to say, or you get a big advance and you never get a royalty check because you're too paying that advance.
Absolutely.
Right, you get disadvanced.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's a word, but you know, people think it's like a nirvana, like it's all upside.
Exactly.
And is you know, from my 13 books are all self-published, and I had two reasons. Well, 2 main reasons. One is I wanted to keep the rights to all my work.
Yes.
And 2, I want to say things the way I want to say them.
Absolutely.
My books are well edited, but a lot of the things in my books a major publisher wouldn't publish because
exactly
they would be controversial, or they wouldn't think it would sell or whatever. And I can sell my own books, so I'm more concerned about getting information out to people.
Yes. Well, that was that was a premise with the Bootleggers Mistress. If you read the book, you'll find, first of all, what publisher is going to publish an African-American book where the protagonist is 95 years old and she's African-American. And so at that point, I knew that if somebody did come to me to traditionally publish, and I did have some people who did come to me because, as you said, Gwen, my book, just like yours and Dr. Lawson, I'm sure that you've written and you make sure it is very well edited. You want the interior design to look exactly like anything that would be traditionally published.
Right.
You want a good cover, a cover that speaks to your book. And that's what I did. I put a lot of effort. Well, let me just stop saying my wife and I. My wife has been a tremendous asset to me for all of my books. But this one, we really, as we say, we put our foot in this one. And so
it's a really good looking cover.
Well, the cover, when I was discussing the cover, I said, I don't want anything too flashy. I want something that just gives you the essence of what this book is about, because when somebody thinks of Bootleggers Mistress, they might think of some floozy, some highfalutin woman, but this is a very demure woman. And somebody says, nobody's going to believe that was a bootlegger's mistress. Well, she really wasn't a bootlegger's mistress, but she had some things that were going on around her life that someone could have said that she was a mistress. But her father, she and her father had a grand plan, and the plan worked up until a point, and then she had to leave. And the rest is a story, as you said, Rhonda, a lot to unpack.
Yes, I like it because it's, if you like historical fiction or if you like Westerns, you have a little bit of all of that in it.
Yes. And the thing about the Bootleggers Mistress is I wanted to make sure that along this journey from the 16-year-old upstart Anderson, South Carolina, African-American woman, where she went to Jacksonville, Florida, and spent some time when she found out that she was pregnant, and had nothing to do with the mistress, although it had to do something with a man that she found. They found each other many years later. And the experience that she had on her own, leaving Anderson to go to Florida, stay in Florida for a certain amount of time, and then go to Newark, New Jersey in the early 1950s.
Mhm.
And she was able to take in so much and learn so much. And anybody who doesn't know about the travel of that travel from the South to the North during the Great Migration, it's a miraculous story. Because when you talk about the Great Migration, we hear about the fact that there were, I don't know how many lynchings from, say, 1890s through the 1930s, and they say, oh, they ran away because they were afraid, or they were sick and tired of being sick and tired. But many people left because they had abilities that they knew were being stifled in the South that they wanted to show in the North. You look at the great musicians that came out of the Great Migration. I just named just a few. John Coltrane was one. John Coltrane wasn't just an African-American musician. He was a musician, a great musician.
Mhm.
He left because he wanted to he said, I'm not going to play the chicken shacks. I'm not going to do the chicken circuit. I'm not going to do the sand on the floor clubs. I want to go to New York, and I want to make my way. If you take the father, they call him the father of the not the Great Migration, but the Harlem Renaissance, Alain Leroy Locke. And Alain Leroy Locke met a lot of Southerners who came to Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. And he showed them how they could use the things that they learned in the South and be able to profit from it in more ways than one in the North. Now, I'm not saying the North was some kind of great place to go, because let's face it, there's a reason why many Southerners call up North up South. Some of the things that happened in the South also happened in the North. And my mother and my father would talk about that quite a bit, except to the point where they would really give me the real stuff. And I had to find it out on my own from talking to people. And unfortunately, I really didn't get deep into this until I was in my 50s, when my mother and I, in the last years, she began to open up to me about things. And I took a lot of notes. And I said, if I ever write any books, I'm going to explore the Great Migration. And by the way, I like to call it America's Great Migration, because they're just called the Great Migration. It sounds like a footnote. When you put America in front of it, you make people open up their eyes and say, look, even though it was a group of more than 6 million African Americans traveling to places north of the Mason-Dixon line, they were still Americans, and they were trying to show what they could do to make this country great.
Right. And I like that you're focusing on the Great Migration, because a lot of this also happened internationally as well, where Black people were saying, I was treated a lot better when I was in France, so I'm going to go back to France. So there was a very large African-American population in Paris. And a lot of people don't realize that.
What was the name of the song? How can you keep them on the phone when they've been the great-grandparents? And people don't realize that was about the Black servicemen who were in France. And they said, why, they're in France and loving France. Of course, when some of the servicemen came back from World War I, Brownsville, Texas, there was a riot in Brownsville, Texas, that meant, and they were in their uniforms, and they were shot dead. That was ridiculous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was. And there's been some reverse migration over the last 20 years or so. Yeah. A lot of people in the North are coming back South, where they may not have been, their parents may have been from the South, or, they may have never lived in the South themselves. But we are, and still are, experiencing people, you're doing it the opposite of where a lot of people are moving South. some of it's the weather, a lot of it's the cost of living. It's a more laid back lifestyle if you're not in the big cities. And you just have more space, you know.
Well, one of the issues of why the two of us are moving is that we've had family members who have passed on, and because we were in the South, we couldn't get to them when we wanted to, or comfort the survivors, and that takes a toll on you when you get a little older. I had a span where my oldest brother passed in October of 2018, and my dad passed in December of 2018. And the next year, my younger brother passed away. And that's not including friends, classmates, teammates, and people like that who passed away. And so that was part of it. But one of the things that really moved me to want to go back north in 2010, well, actually 2009, my mother passed away, and my dad, little did I know, because I wasn't around him, they're in New Jersey and I was down in Florida, that he was going through dementia, and I didn't know about it, and nobody really paid attention. And it's not that they were negligent, it was because my dad was always viewed as a very strong man. And so even though people know about dementia and Alzheimer's, they sometimes don't think it can happen to their loved ones, especially the ones who toted that barge all those years, took care of the family, kept food on the table, roof over your head, a transportation. And so Daddy wasn't one to say, hey, I need help, but he said it to me. And so the Thanksgiving of 2009, I came down, and normally I went up for Thanksgiving. That was my mother's favorite holiday. And I noticed something different about my father. And I kept asking him, I said, do you need me? Do you need me? And he was very proud and said, no, you go back down to Florida. I'll be okay. And what was interesting was I got back, and right before Christmas, he sent me some money. And I said, what? My father never sent me money. Anybody sent me money? Mommy sent the money. She sent the cards. But he sent me something. And so I called him and I talked to him. He said, I need you. And I said, well, what do you need me to do, Dad? He said, I need your company. And my pastor did a sermon, and I didn't write it down, so I can't give you, but it did come from Philippians. And I thought about it, and I said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to New Jersey to take care of him. I had gone through a very dark period of my life for about almost 15 years and had gone through a divorce. So I went to take care, went on, and in fact, I got there on Valentine's Day, 2010. And Daddy's condo, where after they sold the home we grew up in, they sold it and bought a condo, but it wasn't the way my mother would have liked it. It just didn't look right. And all the way up there, I kept asking the Lord, do you want to send me up here to take care of him? I don't know anything about taking care of a grown person. And, many of us didn't think that we would have to take care of our parents. But I did. And for the 2 years that I was in New Jersey taking care of my dad, all of my friends, and when I say all, I would say 99 and 44, 100% of them rallied around me as if I had never left Jersey in my life. Now, I left in 1970 to go to college in Los Angeles, and I never did reside in Newark after that. So I was gone away for 40 years. But they came around me as if we had never, ever parted company.
Yes,
and all we talked about was interesting. We talked about the old days, which of course that would happen. Well, we talked about the Newark Rebellion of 1967, which all of us were really affected by. My group, whether we had the ones who were looting and then the ones who were affected in other ways. I was affected because one of the streets that was a hotbed of the rebellion was right behind my house. And I used to get on the roof, the little landing on the roof, and I'd hear the gunshots. And all of a sudden, I realized that this idyllic place called Newark, New Jersey, was being under assault. And I could not believe it at 15 years old. So all of those stories we began to talk about. And that was the genesis for my book, Magnificent Redemption, which was my third novel. Okay. And that's what really started me on this journey of the Great Migration. So when you talk about going back up north, Gwen, yes, you're right. The weather's good down here. Taxes are low, the whole 9 yards. but there's just something about going home again that just kept telling me, you gotta go back home. And believe me, I don't believe in the adage, you can't go home again, because I did it and I'm going to do it again.
Okay,
All
well,
right,
it's all about your attitude about it, your outlook.
But that's why I was going to ask. I mean, do you feel different? I know when I went back home, because I had been gone so long, my mindset was different. My thoughts were different. So it felt strange going back home. So are you prepared for that bit of culture shock?
Well, it's interesting. When I came to Jacksonville in 1972, I was still a firebrand. I had been out in LA for 2.5 years, and that was during the height of the Black Power movement. I mean, the Black Panther movement, I'm sorry. And all that was going on. So I went from east to west and got melded right into it. So when I came to Jacksonville, just 4 years before I got here in 1968, had just desegregated their schools, what they call desegregation. And the city of Jacksonville had just become consolidated because there were so many African Americans moved in Jacksonville that one of the elections, they would end up electing a Black mayor. And they didn't want that. So they expanded the county, where they brought in the Jacksonville beaches and other places, which raised the non-Black population, which a Black mayor wasn't elected until 2011. So I was coming into a culture that I didn't know. Remember, I had never been down south for any length of time. And so it was a new culture to me. And I, being 20 years old, I was going to come in and I was going to change things. Well, nah, but
all think that in our 20s. Then we
I'm sorry.
realize later
So we all think that
we can change ourselves.
Right.
If we can change ourselves later on, years later, you realize if you can change yourself in your situation, you're doing good.
Well, being in Jacksonville, I learned a lot. I learned about the Southern culture, and I was able to meld that with my Northern roots. And it's been a fantastic journey, almost 49 years, and I learned a lot. I can write some pretty good books about the Northern and the Southern experience if I ever decide to do that.
My sister lived in Jacksonville for 10 years, so that was from the late 70s to the late 80s. That's when she was in Jacksonville. So she went there from school. But we have 2 minutes left, and I want to ask you 2 questions about the Bootleggers Mistress, and then have you let people know how they can get the book. One of our regular viewers asked, what time period does the story take place?
The story starts in right around the late 1930s in Anderson, South Carolina. And Carrie Lacey leaves in 1943. From 1943 until 1951, she's in Jacksonville, Florida, where she spends her late teens and early 20s. And then from 1950, right around 1951, she leaves and she goes to Newark, where she begins her entrepreneurial career. Actually, starts as a nurse's aide at St. Michael's Hospital, which is a real hospital where my mother worked at a time in her life. And in fact, the street where Carrie lives is a real street, Rose Terrace in Newark, New Jersey. So anyway, we moved from the 1950s. And so that's when book begins to go back and forth, back to the 30s and back to and then it travels along through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and the first and second century of the 21st and the first 2 decades of the 21st century, which of course 20 to 2010, 2010 to 2020. And so that's the timeline. It seems to be extremely long, but the book is only 252 pages. So I tried to make it as compatible to a reader, because a lot of readers don't get into reading 400, 500 page books. And that's a reality.
Everybody's busy and they just don't
exactly
a long book anymore.
Exactly. That's reality. So I had to compact that that long journey, nearly what, 78 years or something to that, I think 88 years, into a 252-page book with a lot of touch points that anybody who either knows someone who went through the Great Migration or went through the Great Migration themselves could touch upon, because they remember those touch points and they can relate to some of the things, although fictional, became reality for them.
Okay, and finally, last question, who is in the picture on the cover of the book?
That was as I said, I'm independently published, and what happened, and there's the picture right there on the book. Let me see if I get my finger right.
Well, it's behind you.
Yeah, right.
Behind you.
There was a picture of my mother that when she was in her mid-20s. I sent it to the people who were doing my book cover. I sent them several covers, and that was one of them. And so the illustrator said to me, "I like the book with the lady with the hat. Does that have any connection to you?" And this person didn't know me. And I said, "Yeah, I'm surprised you picked that one." He said, "Yeah, that one really, it makes me feel as if you're trying to tell a story with that woman who's not smiling, but at the same time, she's not sad." And this is funny. He says to me, "She reminds me of a Black Mona Lisa." I said, "Oh, okay, let's go with that." That's what he said. So it reminded him of Black Mona Lisa. So okay, if that's what you say, then let's roll with it. So that's how we picked it. So it's my mother. That's a picture of my mother. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, well, Marc, how can people find you online in social media?
You can find me on facebook.com/the author in you. You can also find me on Instagram and also LinkedIn. My website is Marc Little Writes. That's Marc with a C. MarcLittleWrites.com. And the book can also be purchased at most booksellers, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, all those Target, Walmart, also on Amazon, of course. There are some independent booksellers that have picked up the book, not a lot, because one of the downsides of when you're doing independent publishing, they don't hear about you unless you really work your platform. I have a large platform, but because of the pandemic, some bookstores were really going for any African-American books, especially African-American bookstores. They were going for more provocative books, the anti-racism books and things like that. And I understand that that's not a problem with me. And those books sold well for them because there was an uptick in sales for African-American bookstores right around 2020. I think some of them have they've kind of leveled off at right around now. But non-African-Americans, I guess they were trying to show their cred. They went out and bought all these books, and so they were tearing down books, knocking down the bookstore doors to get to these books. I don't know if that's happening now. So I don't have my book has not been in a lot of independent booksellers, but the good part about it, the book has roots. It is moving well, even though the book is over a year old. It's starting it's picking up more and more sales as it goes along. So, and I'm really pushing it real hard to not lose any luster for the book as it gets older.
Okay, well, Marc, we're at the end of our time, but we appreciate your coming on, and continued success with the Bootleggers Mistress and all of your books.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and look for some more. Once I get settled in New Jersey, I've got a real good one coming out in 2023.
Okay, well, I like you on Instagram, so I'm gonna need you to post a little bit more on there, okay?
Okay, all right, okay, all right, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Okay, have a good evening.
You too, thank you.
Hey, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are in our last interview, and while I bring Brenda more on, I wanted to give away these books. So we're going to do that first, and that'll give people time if they want to answer the questions. So the first book we have is a new book by Reverend Al Sharpton called Righteous Troublemakers, The Untold Stories of the social justice movement. And to get this book, all you have to do is say, on what network is Al Sharpton's TV show?
Oh, I know that one.
Okay, and then, and you know, you can't get, did you get the scholarship books in the mail yet, Rhonda? I mailed them.
I got something in the mail. I'm gonna check.
Okay,
Yeah.
and this one is a memoir called South to America. It's by Imani Perry. These are both advanced reading copies. So HarperCollins donated these for the show. And it's a journey below the Mason-Dixon to understand the soul of a nation. So in order to get this book, you have to answer the question, Arthur Imani Perry is native of what southern state?
Okay, hold up. Arthur.
So
Imani.
the author's name is Imani Perry, and she is a native of what southern state? So whoever answers those first gets
Lydia
books.
already answered the question before I could even type it.
Oh,
When I said,
okay.
on what network is Al Sharpton's TV show? She
Okay,
said SNBC.
yes, that's correct. And
Yeah.
you have to do a little more research about Imani Perry in order to, you have to look up the synopsis of the book to find out. But it looks interesting. It looks like something that's, because I love history, so it looks like something that I would want to read. And I have so many books. I just have so many. My to be read shelf is so full. I don't know when I'm going to get to all of these books, but I'm going to continue to support the authors regardless. So even if I don't get to read them, I can share them with other people. And now we're waiting on our guest, Brenda. Diedrich Brockington, no, Benita Harris answered it first. So Benita Harris, you win the book, the advanced reading copy of the book, and DM or direct message your address for at the National Black Book Festival's Facebook page. Go to message and send us a message and say, I won the book by Imani Perry, and here's my mailing address, and we will mail the book to you.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful because she's a Zeta and it's still founded.
Did you know her? Or you didn't see her profile? Did you know her already?
Well, no, I'm looking at her profile photo.
Okay.
She has her Zeta frame just like I still have mine.
Okay, I see that. I didn't know if you already knew her though. So Brenda, okay. Oh, okay. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. We're glad you got your camera going. And
Thank you.
we were waiting on you to come on. We gave away a couple of books, which we do most weeks. So if we have some to give away. So thank you. I know you're with Royston Publishing, BK Royston, and you have a memoir and it's called Walking in the Shadow of a Schizophrenic.
Power of forgiveness.
The power of forgiveness, because you want to have that part of it in there too. So now the schizophrenic that you are referring to, was that someone in your life?
Yes, my ex-husband.
Oh boy. Well, that's you know, many women have been married to people with all kinds of issues, but schizophrenia that's a serious issue. That's
Exactly.
So tell us how you were able to navigate and survive that experience.
Well, I actually married into mental illness. 3 months into the marriage is when I found out that he was actually a chronic paranoid schizophrenic. The entire engagement, he showed no signs of mental illness or anything. But 3 months into the marriage, I noticed there were a lot of different changes in his mood swings, his attitude about life, even the way that he treated his family, catatonic states that he would actually lie in, hallucinations, and just different things that were going on with him that I never noticed before.
Do
And
you-
so it wasn't until, and I say that it was the guidance of the Holy Spirit to guiding me up stairs to look in this black bag, which was his army bag.
Mhm.
And long story short is where I found his discharge papers, which said that he was officially discharged because of chronic paranoid schizophrenia.
Mm.
Oh, boy.
Do you think, once, now that you have time to look back on things, I know you
Mhm.
said you didn't notice it during the courtship and the engagement, and then it was 3 months in that you noticed it. Do you think that, looking back, that maybe there were signs that you may have seen, but you just didn't recognize?
I actually talked about that in the book.
Mhm.
One in particular, we went to the VA hospital for a checkup. And when we came out the back entrance, he had a bottle of pills and he said, I don't need this medication. And I said, it just innocent and ignorantly, I said, well, if you don't need the medication, I said, then don't take it. But it was then that I didn't realize that the storm of my life was coming.
Wow.
Because at that time I didn't know in fact he really didn't recognize until after we were married that he was actually schizophrenic or actually really sick. He just would not accept it.
Mhm.
And so he was in denial then, but at the same time, it's just I didn't know that much about mental illness and never really heard of schizophrenia. And so, basically, just like me, if I felt like a medication wasn't working for me, then I don't take it. And so it was as simple as that. And maybe a couple of other things as well. But to be truthful, I really didn't know. There was just no signs that he had such a severe illness, or I definitely wouldn't have made that a walk down the aisle with him. And that's why even in the book at the end I say to the audience that being married to him was a dilemma, because I don't know whether I actually made a mistake or whether it was a higher calling, and I talk about that in the book.
But that's a very honest statement, because I think that it's easy to say I made a mistake, but you don't want to tell other people, that I made a mistake, because you always want to look like the person. Well, I was here to help him, but you have to be honest with yourself and say, well, did I make a mistake, or did God want me to be in this position?
Exactly. And anyway, if you have to, if you're going to tell your story to the public, you're going to have to be transparent and honest. If you want people to learn, and even it's for yourself. I mean, I didn't want to spend that much time writing a book and covering up. And I didn't want to portray myself as the victim all the time.
Right.
So I had to admit, that there may have been some things that I missed, at the end, I actually talk about if I made a mistake, I asked God to forgive me.
How long were you married to him?
27 years. That's what prompted me to actually want to be transparent about my struggles and some of the horrific issues that come with mental illness.
Well, was he under treatment during your marriage? Did he get back on medication? Was he seeing a counselor or a specialist?
We went through all of that, the counseling, the different medications, group therapy, you name it. But the thing about it is, if you feel like that you're not sick, that everybody else is sick, that the medication is making you sick, it's just it's an uphill heaver, I guess,
I hear that a lot of schizophrenics stop taking their meds, and that's when they really have challenges. I mean, they can really hurt people. And a lot of times schizophrenics can be violent. did he manifest any of those behaviors?
One of the major problems we had is him staying on his medication. The inconsistency, and because of the inconsistency with medication, he relapsed so many times. And of course, his doctor has said to me, the more they relapse, the worse they get. And yes, he displays some balance because the paranoia and the hallucinations and things where voices is telling you what to do and things that are that you feel that are real, but they're not. And so there were times, that he felt like that he was in danger a lot of times. And so he could become aggressive, especially when it came to actually calling the police to take him to get some help. And I can't say that was being aggressive was a constant thing with him, but there were times that he was.
So do you, how do you, because 27 years is a long time.
Yes.
So, I mean, there are some people who may not have been able to last 1 year, 2 years. What are some lessons that you learned? And what was it that ultimately made you stay for as long as you did?
Well, for one thing, just because someone has a problem or you find out that they have an issue doesn't mean you stop loving them.
Right.
And so when I actually pulled the papers out of the his army bag, I remember putting the papers on my chest and saying, Lord, help me to help him. And I don't want to give everything away, but that one of the reasons why I actually stayed, because I mean, I loved him. I had heard the name, but still really didn't understand or know anything about mental illness, because back then they didn't talk much about it either. And there were many times that we were separated, but that's why I wonder if it was a higher calling, because I was always compelled to help Dallas through this. Even when I had to actually leave town, I still was involved in helping him. I actually talk about that, in the book.
And
And
so what led you to write the book?
The fact that I had stayed with him 27 years. And I wanted, not only did I want people to know my struggles and issues with mental illness, but I also wanted people to understand that they need to be more supportive versus critical about a disease that is possible. They needed to be educated about, that it was something that they hadn't experienced. And so the family itself and the individual is already critical of themselves and judgmental of themselves. And I wanted people to actually to understand that. And another thing is too, I wanted people that were struggling with schizophrenia or any other similar mental disorder to understand that there is no need to feel guilty or feel anything to feel ashamed of. And that if each one of us would search our family line or our ancestor, there's husband, wife, mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, somebody has suffered with or is suffering with schizophrenia or severe depression or some similar mental disorder.
I think you're right. And, it's a well-known secret that mental illness in the Black community usually was swept under the rug.
Exactly.
We knew that a person had mental illness, but we didn't help that person. We just knew they had mental illness and we lived with it, right. or we made excuses for them. I mean, it wasn't really until recent years where we started actually encouraging our people to get help. And to, to seek medication if you need medication, seek therapy if you need therapy, get the help that you need. And so I think books like this are going to be important. And I like what you said, that what we should not be doing is judging people for having a mental illness. You know, we can help them the best way we can, but at the same time, you as the caretaker, you need help as well.
Right. And there was one more reason, is because of the Black community. We tend to ridicule one another, make fun, we and because we don't understand it, you know, we hold to secrecy. We're less likely than many of the other races to get help. And we actually keep the stigma of a negative stigma of mental illness going, because we hurt our own selves and our own people when we make fun of them. I remember when I was younger, there was this guy, and we called him, well, I didn't call him, but the neighborhood children and some of the adults called him Pancake. And every day about the same time, he would come walking down the street like he was marching, shadow boxing. And the major thing was that from head to toe, whatever visible part of his body was covered with white, was this white substance. But we found out that it was flour. And so that's the reason why they called him Pancake. But the only thing I never heard anything kind, except the fact that he once was intelligent. But other than that, he was called crazy. And to this day, that's the reason why I hate that word crazy when it's referred to mental illness, because people are not crazy, they're just sick, you know. And until you experience it, I remember at times laying on my husband's chest crying and asking God to take it away, because I know it wasn't really him.
Well,
So,
you know, for so many years, mental therapy were not available in our communities up until, you know, maybe 30 years ago, really.
Right.
It were really, we didn't have the option of going to see someone for mental illness, and a lot of times for physical illnesses. You know, back in the day, even the hospital help was not available if there wasn't a Black hospital. So it's good for people to know about mental illness, and that their people, the family members, are able to talk about it, and hopefully people who are experiencing this with loved ones, you're giving them some food for thought on how they can handle their situations.
And you know, once you're educated about it, I mean, it's so much to learn about. I mean, I still don't know everything, but once you're educated about it, I'm sorry, I got a mental block. Once you're educated about it, I think you become more empathetical.
Yeah, you understand what's going on.
Yeah, and you're not so focused on the external behavior, because you somewhat understand what's going on with that person, and you empathize with them, because we know when we have some idea what it is not to be in our right mind. So education is really the key, and is what really actually help myself and my children to actually press through.
Now, there have been some cases in the news where people had schizophrenia and killed people because they were off their meds, or they were homeless and just weren't in the mental health system. And so they didn't really know what they were doing, but they're harmful to people. And so what would you say in those circumstances? Because we do need more institutional help, but not the kind of institutions where they would just put people away like in cages, where they really weren't getting help.
And
there needs
that's what was happening with a lot of people, Black and white. They didn't know how to deal with them.
They
just cast them aside. And they were really like caged animals.
Mhm.
So what would you, do you have any ideas on what could be done about that from institutional standpoint?
I think that's one of the major problems. Of course, we know way back then when there's, even if you had, if there was retardation or anything that was unusual, you know, you were isolated. You know, people stayed in institutions for years, you know,
Yeah.
without any help and things like that. But I think that's still one of the major issues today is that we need more long-term facilities for people that are chronically ill, those that actually cannot, and you do have some schizophrenics and other people with severe mental illness that can't function in society, but then there are those that cannot, you know, and so they are homeless or they're running the streets. There's a high risk that they will hurt someone else or themselves. And so one of the major things is trying to build more facilities or have a more long-term stay for people that are chronically ill.
Well, that's
And,
one of the things that with all of the funds that end up getting pushed out to the
Mhm.
to the public when they do these big bills, these big legislative bills where they're spending $1 trillion. It's like the money just, where does it go? It disappears.
Exactly.
It doesn't get spent. And this is something that the state, and I don't mean state as in individual states, I mean the government institutions, they need to have that, because people, unless you're wealthy and can afford one of those high priced institutions, the average family cannot afford the long-term care.
That's
But
true.
it's in the society's interest to get these people treatment, because otherwise they end up harming people or themselves. And that's a lot worse and a lot more expensive overall.
Right.
So,
And I just think that is going to be an ongoing thing. Again, we need the facilities, and as you said, we need the funding behind it. We need people to be more patient, because even with my own situation, sometimes, you know, he was released or discharged before he was even well, because they have a policy, you know, that they're only to stay 2 weeks.
right.
I felt like I was blessed because he was a veteran. I felt like I was blessed in that aspect, because they listened, you know, and a lot of times they allowed him to stay. But again, like I said, it's ongoing. We're all human. We'll never have the complete answer to how to deal with mental illness, but at the same time, it needs to be treated just like someone with a heart disease or any other disease.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
I mean,
Brenda,
you're right on that.
we're actually at the end of our time. So can you let people know how they can get your very important book, telling your experience with living with someone with schizophrenia?
Okay, you can access my website at wisos-pof.com. The title of my website is Why Couldn't I See? It's also at Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble, Nook, and Kindle ebook.
Okay.
Well, we did put the Amazon link in the chat, so the readers will be able to find it. Janice Kearney said, "Thank you for sharing your story."
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah,
The cover.
I started creeping along the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I thought that you could see it, but I guess not.
Now we can see it very well, very clearly.
Yeah, but
very clearly. Okay, well, thank you so much, Brenda, for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
And we appreciate your being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me.
Okay.
All right, you have a great night. And once again, thank you for sharing your story.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week. We had a great lineup of guests. Very amazing. The time went by very quickly.
Good conversation tonight.
Great conversation. So, and no technical glitches, really.
I'm about to say this was better than last week. We had some glitches last week.
But it happens when it's live, anything can happen. And you know what? Somebody was mentioning something to me about, doing a test with each person. I said, you know what? When you watch the news, these are billion-dollar companies, and sometimes
they have glitches too.
They have glitches. The satellite will be gone. The audio won't work. All kinds of things happen. So I think with what we're doing,
I was watching the news yesterday, and while they were doing an interview, they froze. The person froze, and then they disappeared.
Right.
And the anchor about it and kept on moving.
So we, based on we're getting close to 300 guests. We'll be having our 300th guests next month. This is how many people and we don't count it. We've had a few people who we've had more than once. We don't count them. We don't count them like second time. So these are is 300 different people almost that we will have had on the show. So next week's lineup, we have Barbara Beckley. She's a best-selling author and talk show host. Andrea Loney, she has a new middle grade book about Stacey Abrams. She's a HarperCollins author. Jeanette Pope has a mystery thriller, and she's also with BK Royston Publishing. And Chase Bowling, he is the managing editor of SF for the Culture, which stands for Science Fiction for the Culture. It's an imprint. Yeah, he was with the National Black Book Festival. He did a short interview, but he's going to be doing, an interview here, a long interview about his role as managing editor and an author with Wahida Clark Publishing Presents. This is her new imprint that she has for fantasy and science fiction authors. So that's our lineup for next week. And we're excited about that. So that's it for tonight. We'll see you next Tuesday on another exciting episode of Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson signing off.
And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Have a wonderful evening and a great week.
And we'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye.